Hi, and welcome to this special podcast episode in partnership with Chase for Business. I'm your host, Ben Baer with Fast Company Custom Studio. In this episode, I sit down with Ben Walter, CEO of Chase for Business, to get the latest insights in small business intelligence as we transition from 2025 into 2026. So, Ben, you spend a lot of time traveling and talking with small business owners across the country. As we approach the end of 2025, how would you describe the current state of small business in the U.S.?
My honest answer is more resilient than I expected. Just given all the noise we've had in the news cycle between tariffs and the Fed and everything else that seems to be consuming the news every day, business owners are pretty resilient and still pretty optimistic. We survey our customers. 3/4 of them say revenue's going up and things are going really well. That's a pretty good number for any economy, but even for a good economy, that's pretty good. So we still hear noise around inflation. We hear noise around tariffs. We hear noise about uncertainty, some of that stuff. A lot of it got quieter after the tax bill passed.
Okay.
That really, regardless of what anyone's personal views are on that, the certainty that was provided by resolving that was significant in the eyes of small business owners. They know what they can expense. They know how that works. And that gave many of them the confidence to go ahead and invest. And I think the economy has held up in terms of demand. And ultimately, if you're a small business on the ground, you're much more concerned with the demand that you see on your bottom line than you are with what goes on in Washington or whatever.
Yeah, and I know we spoke a little bit earlier this year on similar topics, and I think you were saying that resiliency was there, earlier this year, and it seems to be continuing.
It is continuing. I mean, one of the things, and we might have talked about this last time, but we always see a bit of a divergence in small business owners between how they say their own business is going versus the broader economy. They always think their own business is doing better. There's a little bit of, sort of natural optimism baked into being an entrepreneur anyway, so you'd expect some of that. But when the news cycle gets thorny, what you find is, that people's sentiment on the broader economy ebbs and flows based on the news cycle, but their view of their own business doesn't. Their view of their own business is pretty sober-eyed. So as long as they feel good about their own business, I feel pretty good about what they see in the economy, because they will tell us if things start to soften up.
As we're heading into the end of the year and heading into 2026 planning, what are sort of the challenges that are out there sort of in the economic area for small business owners, and what are the opportunities right now from what you're seeing?
So there's two, which will sound familiar because they've been challenges for a while, but they're manifesting a bit differently now. So you've heard a lot about, over the last few years, about the difficulty finding people. There was obviously the period around COVID where a bunch of people opted out of the labor force, and that had an impact. Now we have something different, which is the immigration dynamic. Fewer people coming in, some people leaving. Again, regardless of your personal political views on that, it is putting some pressure on certain sectors of the labor force. So, and on top of that, given sort of the news cycle about general uncertainty in the economy, there's there's clearly some, quote, they call it job hugging, people not leaving, people hanging on. So, I think that's true of employers too. So small businesses are hanging on to their employees, but employees are hanging on to their jobs. So that makes open positions hard to fill. There's a little bit of friction coming from that. I would say the other is still the inflation bug. It's really important to disaggregate inflation, because the headline number has come down. But if you look at the latest one, a big driver of it coming down was actually deflation in the energy sector. So oil got cheaper, which is good. I mean, so that does take pressure off of people's pocketbooks. And so I'm not looking that gift horse in the mouth. But if the number is coming down a little because one of the big contributors goes negative, it means there's other things that are still going up, right? It's just how math works.
Yeah.
And so, for example, there's still a lot of pressure in food prices. There are pockets, certain commodity imports see some pressure. So partly with the restrictions and other things. So you have to disaggregate it. And so some industries are more immune from it, and some are more acutely exposed.
Yeah. Where are you seeing potential opportunities as we head into the new year? Obviously, the challenges we know, and having to stay resilient within those inflationary pressures and changes in economic status, and trying to find the right talent. But what about opportunities? What are you seeing out there? What are you hearing?
Well, look, it's not specific to any industry. So what matters most for small businesses is aggregate demand. And so far, spending and aggregate demand has held up. So we could talk about the opportunities in particular for small business, but they would be aligned with the same thing the corporate sector is focused on, which is obviously AI, technology revolution, robotics. We're seeing tons of startups in that space, in both spaces, unquestionably. But that's also powering the efficiency of old economy industries, so we're seeing them modernize. Huge investments in those sectors to improve the efficiency, whether that's on the marketing front, the operational front. All of those are real, but they're not specific to any sector.
When you mentioned AI, I mean, is there an opportunity for small businesses to be the suppliers to those, again, those are big enterprise companies spending billions of dollars. Is there an opportunity out there for the small, medium-sized businesses to sort of say, okay, this is an area I should be looking at if my business is the right fit for it in terms of being a supplier to those businesses that are growing in the AI category?
Oh, unquestionably. I mean, look, first of all, small businesses always do better when big business does well because, like you said, they support that infrastructure. But you can look at where the investment, in the old school Econ 101, GDP is C plus I plus G plus NX, and the I is investment. And if you look, a lot of small businesses are focused on consumer spending, but some are focused on business spending. And I think there where we see the AI boom is a super cycle of investment, things like data centers, power, all the things that it takes to power the AI revolution. And there's a whole sector of the economy that can be buoyed by support for that. So if you're going to build a new data center, wherever it is, you're going to need to you're going to have contractors that are doing the actual physical building. You're going to have power plants being built to support that. And then you're going to have all the infrastructure that goes, if there's a power plant in the middle of the desert somewhere the people who work there are going to need all the services that small businesses provide. And there's going to be housing that needs to be built, and there's going to be houses that need to be sold, and there's going to be school coaching for the kids who are in those new schools. All of that happens. So when you see any investment super cycle, those dollars typically flow through from the largest down to the small. And so there's definitely opportunity for small businesses to participate in that investment super cycle.
What about areas that are like, event-based cycles? So World Cup is coming in the United States next year, Olympics coming in a couple of years following. Are those areas where small businesses should start to think about, is it in a similar fashion, is my business something that I should be looking at those events to see if I can benefit from the surge and sort of opportunity and also dollars coming into those places? Is that something that is going to be a 2026 thing in 2028 when it comes to LA and the Olympics?
Yes, with a caveat and a full but. The caveat is it's very geographically driven. So there are 6 cities or 7 cities or whatever it is that are in the States that are getting the World Cup. The Olympics are obviously only in LA. So those are the caveat is it's site dependent. And the but is when we talk to clients, we encourage them to think really thoughtfully about what kind of investments they're willing to make for the short versus the long term, right? So some of these are booms that are going to be sort of a moment in time to capture some opportunity and then gone. And then others are an opportunity to build a muscle or a capability you don't have, and then you'll figure out, and then you have a plan for how to repurpose that infrastructure or capacity once that, event-driven boom is over. And so I think it's important to distinguish between the two. Would you open a whole second restaurant in LA because the Olympics are coming? Probably not. That's a lot of infrastructure. But would you invest in maybe a couple trucks that can do pop-up and serve that surge and then can roam differently afterwards? Maybe. I mean, that's a very sort of low-tech example of it. But thinking about the difference between investment in permanent fixed assets versus variable assets, I think is really important when you think you have something that's a surge in demand that might not be permanent.
We talked about some of the macro and big picture issues. Are any issues that are sort of to you are flying under the radar that you think are important for small business owners to kind of either keep in mind or should be raised, that should be raised up a little bit higher in their minds in terms of as we head into next year? The
big one is that AI is not just for big business. I mean, more than half of our small businesses tell us they're implementing it already in their business or have plans to. We see huge potential for the ability to democratize marketing. So think about social media campaigns. These tools now enable the smallest of businesses to produce professional quality social media campaigns that previously would have only been available to the largest companies who can afford sophisticated agencies to produce them. Big opportunities there. Big opportunities in the back office in terms of efficiency, operational processing and things like that. So I think broadly, the biggest thing I would say is for small businesses is don't miss the AI boom in terms of how it applies to your business. It is not only for the corporate sector.
And how are you guiding people to say, all right, they want to take they want to look into this, they want to think about it, but they want to do it smartly because obviously you don't want to go out and hire a consultant to be your AI consultant. What's the advice as they're sort of saying, okay, I'm aware of it, I maybe have used ChatGPT a little bit, but now I want to start using it fully for my business. Any sort of initial advice and guidance on how to do it smartly?
So a few things. One is, I would say it's something to learn into. So you don't have to solve every problem you have with it day one. The second is, I think being intentional about where you choose to experiment with it is really important, because if you try to apply it to everything all at once, it doesn't go well. And if you try to apply it to something that isn't really receptive to it. So that's why I gave the example of marketing, or for example, order processing. Try to come up with a couple of 2 to 3 places where you see some sort of either inability to compete because of cost or operational friction. And now, in terms of resources, there are lots. We have them at Chase. We have consultants who help some of our clients with that, who are looking to implement AI in certain markets. There are other resources out there for small businesses through state and local governments. It depends where you live. It depends what industry. Your trade association might have them as well. But I wouldn't go headlong into hiring, big expensive consultants on day one. I would think the more narrowly you can define the problem you are trying to have AI solve for you, the better you can design a solution with it.
What have you learned from your experience and the Chase for Business experience working with AI so far? Any initial takeaways?
Right now, today, and it will keep getting better, but right now, today, it is best placed with being applied to processes that you do over and over and over and over again. So the more repetition, it's less good at one-off tasks still. So we've had more success with things that we do hundreds of times, thousands of times, millions of times, whatever it is. And the second is, it's only as good as the expertise who's teaching it. That's the most important thing, it can learn from you, and the learning algorithm is incredible, and it's getting better and better and better. For example, if you want to use it to write things for you, the more you can show it things you've written in the past and show it your style, the better quality of output you will get from the tool versus just asking it blindly to do something for you. So prompt engineering is a real thing. Getting people, so it's a skill you have to learn. Just like you had to learn how to use Microsoft Word to write, you have to learn how to use ChatGPT to write. And it's not just write something that does this. You can upload background documents, you can upload context, you can then iterate with it through context. And it gets better and better, and then it becomes a tool you can use, and it sort of success begets success when you learn how to use it.
Yeah, we've been seeing the same, sort of feedback from the business owners that we talk to, and what we've even at Fast Company do as well is like the more prompting and more specificity that you put into what you're trying to do with it for leads to a better result and leads to a more agentic approach where it's more specialized and specific to what you want to do versus just a broad-based sort of description, which may or may not get you what you need.
Yeah, and I would say, watch the space, because I think there will probably be very industry or vertical specific agentic solutions that are focused on narrower problems, and then there'll be more general use ones like ChatGPT that is a more general use one that you have to then configure and train on your specific use case. So both of those will exist, but agents are real. They're coming. They can do more. They can give you leverage. But I would also say, just like any other new technology, the first time you saw an Excel spreadsheet, were you a whiz? Probably not.
No.
You had to practice. You had to learn. You had to play with it. You had to make some mistakes. This is no different.
Yeah. Personally speaking, as we're heading into the end of the year and into next year, what has you sort of optimistic and interested as you head into 2026?
Specifically, the fact that for all the noise, and there's plenty of it, guys, turn off the noise and revel in the numbers. The entrepreneurial spirit of America is alive and well. Business starts continue to be a step function above where they were pre-pandemic, even though they're off their highs. We are starting businesses in this country at a record pace. We are seeing record growth in those new starts, and we're seeing a success rate that has not declined despite that. So, what makes me optimistic as someone who serves small businesses is that ecosystem is alive, it's well, it's thriving, it's growing, and it's powering the economy forward.
And I think you feel that spirit. We're here at the Make Your Move Summit that Chase for Business puts on. 1,000 business owners downstairs. There's definitely an energy and an optimism, and also that resiliency as I've talked to them over the day. And it's also look forward to as we hit our 250th year as a country next year, that the American dream and American spirit is alive and well. Ben Walter, thanks for joining us and sharing your insights, and good luck with the rest of the year.
Thanks so much for having me today.
That's all for this special episode. I'm your host, Ben Baer with Fast Company Custom Studio. Thanks again for joining us.